What we're seeing now is the culmination of technologies reaching such a point in GIS that the fidelity, the accuracy at which we can represent what's outside the window is so much higher.
This podcast is brought to you by the team at Esri Australia. To get your hands on more short, sharp and immediately usable resources, head to the Esri Australia website and search for Goldmine.
Welcome to GIS Directions. I'm Wayne Lee Archer.
I'm Todd Snicker.
And I'm Mary Murphy.
And today, as father of real world twins, we're going to be talking about something very, very dear to my heart. We're going to be talking about digital twins and trying to define what that thing is.
Should we still be using the term digital twin, or would it be more accurate to refer to these digital simulations of real life as living digital twins? That's my big question for today.
I do like the addition of the word living in there because a lot of this is about real time. And, you've heard me wax lyrical about it already, Tar. I actually have a bit of a problem with this whole idea of the term digital twin. Because from my perspective, what we've been doing for, the better part of 50 years in digital GIS is creating a representation of the world outside our window. But I'd lay down the argument that whenever we're trying to make a representation of the real world, is that not creating a twin?
I suppose then that harps back to maybe we should define or give a definition of what we think a digital twin is. I've been asked a number of times, what is a digital twin? You very much have your idea of what a digital twin is. And I suppose if I'm thinking of it, or if I have to answer that type of question, I usually think of it from the perspective of whoever that end user is, right? Because that's who I end up in front of, is that end user. So I usually think of it as some form of interactive or queryable digital representation of the real world, which, like you said, I think we've been doing that for a long time anyway. And that real world, in my mind, could be at any scale. So I could do that from a piece of street furniture to a building, to a street itself, to a city, or whatever it wants. But I, as the end user, I want to be able to see the features, understand the relationships between them, and have them behave as I would expect them to behave, those relationships to behave under certain conditions. And they could be real-time conditions, or me entering parameters or modeling scenarios and seeing those results. So it's a high bar that I have as an end user, what my expectation of a digital twin is. So conceptually, for me, it's almost metaverse-esque kind of thing. That's what I'm
Ooh.
getting into, right?
Oh, okay. I like that. So I need to point out that firstly, it's essential that we look backwards to look forward. And by that I mean, we have a rich history of paper-based maps, digital maps, as well as schematics for infrastructure and building information models. So we already have a digital record of our world. But what we should be focusing on is a living record of our world. What's here and now? How has it changed? What have we done better? What can we improve? We talk about sustainable practices and the future, and they're all fair points, absolutely. But we need to have access to our current state if we want to promote and engage the smart city framework. Living twins, they enable us to undertake, simulations, integrations, testing, monitoring, maintenance of everything from infrastructure to buildings to what our future can be. So that's really where I fall into the living twins. Digital twin, yes. Living twins, that's where I'm going with this.
I love the use of the word simulation there, Tar, because if we actually have a look at the dictionary or the Wikipedia definition of what a digital twin is, it says that it's a virtual representation of a real world physical system or process. But if you have a look into it deeper, it actually was born out of NASA. In an attempt to improve the way they model their spacecraft within the physical world. And what we're seeing now is the culmination of technologies reaching such a point in GIS that the fidelity, the accuracy at which we can represent what's outside the window is so much higher. And we understand that because of the fidelity of the data in the world around us. We get to see, the traffic, flowing by us. We get to see the river flowing under the road or over the road. We get to see the surface of the road. And that, I think, is the real key to this notion of twins. It's bringing in all of these various different data sources, all of this data at different levels of granularity, and different levels of real timeness, so that it becomes more and more like the experience we have in our head as we're walking around in the 3D world.
I love what you've just said there, that it's smart city thinking. It's smart cities and where a lot of our local and state governments are heading to or they're at. And speaking of smart cities, Singapore created the first country scale digital twin, and they brought in imagery data and building information models and transport information data and used it to redesign major sections of Singapore's rail infrastructure. And that right there, to me, that represents a beacon for digital twins and smart city thinking. Let's note that as an island nation, being able to represent true buildings and infrastructure represents a huge benefit for this side of the world, structurally, culturally. So that really speaks into, the fidelity of that data, how we're creating a true representation at such a large scale, and we're really moving towards those smart cities. As a member of a community, that's where I'm trying to go. That's where I'm trying to be.
Yeah, and I'm going to bring it back to my kind of end user experience here, right? And exactly what you've said as well, Wayne, in combination what you've said there in Ta, is this idea of where that level is, right? Where is that threshold? Once we cross a particular threshold, are we now in digital twin territory? From what you're saying, Wayne, no, we're always in digital twin territory.
It's not the level of what Tar was just talking about with Singapore, how they've done a whole country-wide representation of their data. It's a small slice. It may be a representation of your building on campus, and it's as you get more and more information layered in there, as you build up that bulk of information, it becomes closer and closer and closer to the real world. And you get those real world like insights into what's going on. And that's the power of digital twins. Once we actually get the data fidelity up that high, you get to see stuff just the way you get to see it outside your window and through your eyes in real life. And those are when the best insights really come to play, I think.
Okay, so Mary, we have defined it, and I think that's always the best way to start any kind of topic. We've defined it. Wayne, from where you're going with this, what are the pillars that underpin digital twins?
Yeah, let's help people get started.
I'm so glad you asked, because there is a process to this. When we talk about digital twins, we've got four key pillars to building digital twins. Well, these are the four elements of a digital twin. And so listen carefully. We'll be coming back to them over this conversation. We start off with data capture and integration.
So that's our first place. Is that where we begin, or is that just one of the pillars?
Oh, this is one of the pillars, but I mean, it always comes back to the data.
Yeah.
Agreed.
Right.
Yep.
And so, data capture and integrating data is super important. That's one of the key parts of this. Modeling the real world is what twinning is about, and you can't model it unless you've got data. And the more data you get, the higher that fidelity the representation becomes. And that's what we're talking about with twinning. The second pillar or the second element is, and this is, I think, what really sets aside what we've been doing for decades versus this actual notion of a living digital twin or a living twin. And this is real time and visualization. It's about the real time. It's about the culmination of technology has brought us to a point where we can actually see things like they are in the real world. That's our definition of a twin. So this is real-time traffic data. This is IoT sensors. All of this coming in together in real time so that we can see those insights with all of that information overlaid on each other. So we've got data capture, we've got real-time and visualization. Now we're talking about that third pillar, the third element of digital twins and then digital twin design. And this is super important. I think this is one of the most, if not the key part of the actual pillars of the digital twin. This is sharing and collaboration. This is about bringing together different viewpoints on the world. You can't all have all of the data all of the time. But there are people out there, other people that aren't you, that do have the data and do have their own little view on their own world, their own mini twin. And so when you start to share and when you start to collaborate between organizations and between departments, you can bring all of this data together into a single place. And that's when you get to, really get down and see some insights. You can have your traffic data on top of your weather data, on top of your road data, and actually really start to see things all together.
Now you said 4 pillars. What's that last pillar?
Well, I don't necessarily think that this is a pillar in terms of it doesn't actually drive building the twin. This is the why we do it, right? So, what it is, I know you know what I'm about to say, Mary. It's analyzing and predicting. This is the why do we build a twin? It answers that.
Yeah, leveraging the twin.
Absolutely. Realizing the twin effect, the digital twin effect.
Focusing on those first 3 pillars, then I guess where do we land? What are we doing? Like, how are we getting that data? How are we capturing it? How are we visualizing and collaborating? What's the tech behind it? That's what I'm here for.
Yeah, so how do we like start from the beginning? Because we've said, we have data capture and integration as probably that first step there at the very, very beginning. So how do we actually build it? How do we do this brick by brick, pixel by pixel? How do we jump in and actually start doing this? How do we build this digital world, this living digital world? So we're starting with that particular category, I assume, as our kind of that's where we start, that data capture and integration.
The data capture and integration step. So, once you've got your data, then you can build out the twin.
Yeah, so what tech do we need? I might direct this first to ArcGIS Pro. That's your kind of starting point, right? Your desktop GIS application has to be. So that will allow you to do things like your visualization, your analysis, your data maintenance, integration with maybe your enterprise system, and so on. So that's like your starting point. And as you said, Wayne, earlier on, if you have this hierarchy or scale or sliding scale of digital twins, everyone starts with those, points, lines, polygons, and a few bits of raster, and that's what you're doing. So that's your desktop GIS, and then maybe your ArcGIS Online slash your enterprise portal would be kind of where you would go next in your enterprise deployment. What else though do we need? Because I want to help these people get up and running.
I would say some of the next tools that we can talk about are things like Survey 123 and field maps. So, this is where we're almost getting into the reality capture side of things, which is another thing that we can talk about. But, first and foremost, you've got field workers out there looking at light poles, looking at defects, and, vegetation encroachment, and capturing that data using tools like field maps and Survey 123. So there's the next layer on top of that foundational stuff that you get through ArcGIS Online, through Enterprise.
Any other data capture and integration pieces of kit that we need? What do you reckon, Ta?
Planner and me says ArcGIS Urban. ArcGIS Urban, from my perspective, so dope, right? It's a web-based 3D application that supports scenario planning and impact assessment. So that predictive element, the why of what we want to do, and then that impact assessment. I really want to put something out there that will be for the greater good. How is everyone going to be affected, and then how can we start future planning? So ArcGIS Urban for the win for me.
Yeah.
And so that includes like building information model as well, doesn't it? So like this is representing the as-built world. So it's exactly what we're talking about with digital twins. I think that's a great call.
Anything else, Wayne, that we might throw in there for our data capture?
Data capture, so again, we're going further and further down the fidelity, scale. Obvious call out here would be drone to map, would be site scan. This is where you're actually getting that point data, those point clouds out of LiDAR scans. Is that not like super uber twinning? Like when you're actually got, millimeter perfect and millimeter accurate representations of the real world. How do you catch that? Well, you catch it with, reality capture tools. And for me, reality capture is the best in breed. This is the layers of tools that you would work through and build up through to capture the data that you need to put your twin together.
All right, so that's lots of lovely information around the products and we can use in this particular part of the process for our data capture and integration. But have we got any examples? Any examples of some amazing digital twins out there that we can drive people to have some a nosy around the place? Any ideas?
Yeah, yeah. I want to jump in and say Snowy Hydro for the win for sure.
Fabulous. Yeah, well, I'll say Fremantle Ports. They've done some fantastic ones. Any other ones?
I'm going to say head overseas. I know we have the Grand Masters overseas in this. So Singapore, Geospace C is a great example.
Oh, Malaysia, MRTC Malaysia?
Yes,
Yes.
fantastic.
Mm.
MRTC Malaysia. Yeah, absolutely. Excellent. I mean, so people are doing some fantastic things, and there's lots of examples, and we'll definitely throw some links down into those show notes for everyone.
How do we get people started? Like, where do they go? How can they find information? Am I getting a trial? Am I getting like a course? What am I doing?
So you might want to start with some introductory, say, pro courses to get hands-on, because we are talking about the data capture and integration. So we need to get hands-on with our data. So that could be things like your introduction courses, like Introduction to GIS, ArcGIS Pro Essential Workflows, ArcGIS Online Essential Workflows, maybe even an introduction to how you're going to integrate with your enterprise stack, right? So that might be your enterprise configuring your base deployment or administration workflows. So those are those kind of core things that you might want to look at. And then if you do want to look at your data management and capture in the field side of things, that field data course that we have is very, very good as well. So they would be that, real core starting point, and then build out from there. And then Learn ArcGIS is excellent. If you have a particular industry in there that you're interested in, like there's lots of AEC and BIM things in there in particular, because a lot of people, that's where they come in. That's where you dive into. But I suppose my top tip would be planning is key. Jump in, get a look around, get a feel for it all, but it comes down to you and your need. Sit down, plan it out.
Great tip. My tip is start with what you know. Remember that we've talked about the different types of twins, little twins and big twins. If what you're modeling is a utility network, then start with utility network modeling. Get into those training courses, get utility network certified. But start with what you know, and then start to bring in those other forms of data. And you might find that you're stepping into those other pillars and collaborating with people in doing so.
To help you get started with these tips, we've added all the resources we've spoken about to our website. So that's gisdirectionspodcast.com.au, including all the information you'll need to get started with the 4 pillars of digital twins. I said 4 there, Wayne. I know you say 3, but it's definitely 4 pillars. We'd also love to hear any tips from you guys, the ArcGIS user community. So jump onto the website to send them through, or connect with us through LinkedIn or Twitter, and hopefully we can feature some of those tips as part of our resources and ongoing program.
So yeah, hit us up on the socials and keep on the conversation about digital twins. But for now, that's us. Keep on twinning.
Happy mapping!
Catch you next time.
The views and opinions expressed in this podcast are solely those of the hosts and do not necessarily represent the views or opinions of Esri Australia.